And this year I'm doing something very different, something that I've never done before, which is I'm really exploring what it takes to think about trends and to be somebody who sees trends before they happen. And it was really interesting for me this time because I had to go back and look at what is it that I do and what is it that I've been doing for the last 10 years to be able to think in this way, and what is it that I have been teaching. So this year, I'm not focusing so much on trends. I'm focusing on the way that you have to think so that you can start to identify trends yourself. I think one of the things that is really making us afraid for the future is that we feel like we're losing control. And anytime anyone feels like you're losing control in any situation, that's scary. And I think a lot of what you see right now is, oh, AI is going to take over the thinking for us. It's going to take over the jobs for us. It's going to take over the technology for us. And the less control we have, the more afraid we feel. So what I wanted to talk about this year is, what does it take to get that back? What does it take to feel like you're more in control, because you can understand where the technology is going, but also understand where the gaps are and where you can have more humanity come back to it. So this idea, I think, of non-obvious thinking, as I started writing about it and as I started talking about it, I came to this conclusion that if we're going to change the future of the world, we need more non-obvious thinkers, people who are able to think in this way. It can't just be a few people who are entrepreneurs who start billion-dollar companies. It can't be a few people who are futurists standing on stage telling you what the future is going to be. We all have to start thinking like this. And as soon as I thought that, the next question is that possible? Like, can everybody start to think this way? Is it just certain people can do it and certain people can't? And I think it is possible. I think everybody can think this way. So that's what I'm trying to share, a method for doing that. I was in Brazil twice. I was in Argentina once. I was in Uruguay once. So, I mean, I do get to travel to the region. And there's a few things that I saw that are really interesting for me. One is that Brazil has an amazing design culture, both from an art point of view, but also from a marketing and advertising and branding point of view. I mean, there's so many beautifully designed brands. I pay a lot of attention to that. I come from the marketing world, so I love that sort of thing. And really, really talented people. I think one of the things that I see, whether it's Brazil or also Argentina in particular, is that there's this feeling that you have to accomplish a certain amount before you can kind of go big, as they would say in America. And one of the things that I talked about from the stage is that the people who I see in America who are going big are not going big because they have more talent or even because they have more funding. It's because they have more confidence based on just having confidence. And the classic example of that is somebody who's sort of failing until they stop failing, right? That's the mentality that they have in certain places. And I think the world would be a little better if less Americans had that mentality and more people from other countries had it instead. Because you would have more innovation coming from other places that felt like it was coming from people who were like, I belong on this stage, I belong there. So one of my big missions, accidentally, while I was traveling, became to try and explain to everybody there, based on somebody who travels the world, that you actually are already there. Like, you have the talent, you have the opportunity to do these things. You just have to step into that role and do it in a way that an American might. And I realize that it's a very American mentality that I'm bringing to these places, but I think sometimes they need to hear that to think about it in that way. The thing is that every year when I come back to South by Southwest, there's this expectation that every trend that I would talk about now will be completely different from what I was talking about last year. And if that was actually true, then I wouldn't be very good at this, because if the trends change every year, that means it actually wasn't a trend last year because it just expired. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I have said before in my talks, and I'll say again this time, is the only future we can make is the one we can imagine. And so we have to be able to imagine a future where AI is helping us to be more successful and more prosperous and helping make the world better and not taking over and making the world worse. Keep the optimism by looking at reality instead of theory. Because I think a lot of the pessimism and the dystopia and the imagined future that's going to be terrible is imagining. Whereas there's a lot of people who are solving real problems today, entrepreneurs, organizations, nonprofits, experts. And if you look at what they're doing right now to solve some of these problems, you will feel hope, because you look at what they're doing and you think, if this person who's doing this in this way could do it like this, they would change the world. And there's hundreds of people like that, not one or two. And so I think that when somebody says, oh, I don't feel any of this optimism, I don't understand how you could be optimistic when all of this stuff is happening and all of these bad things are happening. What I say to them is, you're just looking at the stories of things going wrong and not looking at any of the stories of things going right. And when you surround yourself in your life with stories of things going wrong, of course you're going to be pessimistic. Of course you're going to think the world is going to be worse, because you don't have any evidence that shows anything other than that. So if I take my lens out to 2050 and think about like what's going to happen, I think culturally there's going to be more of a backlash against full automation. And I think that people will seek out more analog experiences and have those as part of their day. So there'll be some things that they choose to do. Even though we'll have the robot that can make the coffee, there'll still be people who, do it the traditional Brazilian way with the, with the whole thing on the top, and like they'll make their coffee that way, not because technology doesn't exist to make it, and not because if you measured the chemistry of the coffee, maybe it was more pure or tasted better with the automation. They'll do it the old way because of the nostalgia of it and because of the tradition of it, and because sometimes it tastes better, even on a human level, right? Same thing with like people wanting to drive their own cars and not trusting the technology to just drive their cars. 2050 is 25 years from now, right? We're going to have self-driving cars and they're going to be good. But there's still going to be some people who say, you know what, I want to drive a car. And that's going to create challenges on the road. Like, is it going to be legal to drive a car at that point yourself? Like, are you going to have to go on special tracks to drive the car yourself as opposed to being on the main road? Are the cars going to be flying as opposed to driving on the road? I mean, I don't know the answers to those macro big questions, but I do know that there's going to be this desire for humans to have that analog physical experience and not have everything be automated or digital, right? And know that that's going to be true. So when I think about like what's going to happen in 2050, I try to think about the balances of these things. Like, more people will live in cities, but more people will abandon the cities and say, I want to not live in the chaos and the automation and everything that comes with the city. I want to live outside of the city. And so a major challenge is going to be, how do we bring the mindsets of somebody living in a city and somebody living in a rural environment somehow together so that they can understand each other? Because right now that's a major problem in the world. They just don't understand each other. People in the cities never go out to the country and talk to real people. And so they just don't understand how somebody lives outside. And in general, it's a one-way problem. People who are living in the country do come to the city because they have to for various things. So they understand. And plus the media they see tells them about the city. So like they understand what's going on in the city. The people in the cities are the ones who don't understand what's happening outside of the cities unless they choose to go out and talk to real people and ask them how they live and what their lives are like. So that division is going to be a big challenge in the world by 2050, I think. But I think some big macro problems we will have really good solutions for. I think we'll have really good solutions for cleaning the ocean. I think we'll have really good solutions for pollution by then, and much better policies for it so that pollution will eventually go down. People are on a macro level saying that the population of Earth is going to kind of hit a moment when then it starts decreasing. So we're going to have population contraction, maybe not in that short time frame of the next 25 years, but it's going to start in certain countries. It's already starting. where there's more older people. People are living longer, so that's going to create a whole different dynamic. I mean, there's all these things that none of these things are like things that I made up. These are all things that we know are going to happen. The challenge is just like which one's going to take over or make the most impact on the world by 2050. And that's something that is a fun thought experiment, but really hard to say with like, this is what's going to happen.